So Stephen, how long have you been here at the Birds of Prey Center?
So I started at the center in 2003, so that'll be almost 17 years now in April. So yeah, after I finished graduate school, I was looking for a job that would keep me in the Charleston area and maybe fill some of my curiosities, and that was 17 years ago.
When did you know that science was something that you wanted to pursue, not just as a passion or something you enjoyed, but as a career?
Right, so I come from a line of scientists. My dad's a medical doctor. My grandfather was a PhD researcher. But again, that line of science kind of wasn't so much for me. I grew up outside a lot. My dad sort of exposed me to the natural world in the Charleston area, you know, hunting and fishing and doing all those things that you can do outside here. But I had some teachers early on. So in elementary school, Miss Harrison was my science teacher, and there were a number of sort of experiential clubs that she made available to all the students, an insect club, a bird club. So she kind of inspired this curiosity about the little things that are all around us all the time. And so I think I always kind of knew that part of science was going to be a part of what I wanted to do. So
science is a very broad subject. What is it about birds that really gets you excited, or that you wanted to put your whole life into?
Yeah, so what is it about birds? Well, everybody has their own thing. I can remember as a kid having nesting kites in my backyard, and that was really exciting. I can remember that birding class with Miss Harrison in 5th grade. Ultimately, I think in college I took an ornithology class when I was back going to finish my degree in biology. Before I went to graduate school, I took an ornithology class on the recommendation of a friend of mine, and we went birding and learned bird calls and learned all the groups of birds and the scientific names, and started that kind of rekindled this passion for information. I think their accessibility is probably the nicest thing about them. You know, you don't have to try hard. There's birds flying all around us. They're everywhere you go, and so you get lots of opportunities to gather information about a cool thing. Plus, they're really cool. They have lots of diversity, and so they're attractive in that way. I think over time, one of the things that has been really important in kind of driving about birds is that ultimately, I believe, and again, I'm not the one out there gathering the scientific data, but I believe if we made a concerted effort to pay attention to bird populations a little more closely, we'd be gathering information that could really make lots of differences.
What is your passion? What do you do to recharge your battery?
That's a great question. So I love spending time with my 2 beautiful daughters and my wife. That's a big thing. But when I have time for myself, my big recharge is music. In school, one of the things that I've spent a lot of time doing was singing in choirs, and all the way up to glee club and barbershop quartet and chamber singers in high school. And I've continued that, and I play bluegrass music. I play the mandolin, and if I have quiet time, that's what I'm going to be doing. Yeah.
Why'd you choose a mandolin?
So I played cello in orchestra with Mr. Ruskus in the 6th grade, and I didn't play that for very long. And then in high school, I picked up a guitar because it was what you did if you were cool, you know, and played guitar all through college. And one day I was actually going out to Seabrook to work for the summer. I worked at Camp St. Christopher for a couple of years in college, and I went into Fox Music to buy guitar strings, and there was a mandolin hanging behind the counter. And I said, how much for that? And I walked out of the store with a mandolin, and I never looked back. That was probably 1996, 97, something like that. And I don't play much guitar anymore. The mandolin is, it's a beautiful instrument. It's simple, it makes sense. And then bluegrass music, I think it's kind of like Birds, I focus on birds of prey because they're relatively easy to identify, big and exciting, and not a lot of them. Bluegrass music's kind of the same way. All the songs are basically the same. 3 minutes of this and the same chord progression, so it's simple.
Sitting in a 747, just watching them clouds roll by. Can't tell if it's sunshine or if it's rain. I'd rather be sitting
The teaching stuff I get to do here is all the stuff I really like. I get to talk to people, both children and adults. I get to see them learning and hear the stories of them applying their learning.
So we know you enjoy the teaching aspect that you get to do out here. There's obviously a lot more than just a couple tours you do a day. Take us through a day in the life. What do you do when the tours aren't happening?
Right, so I mentioned that there's always parts that maybe are a little less desirable. My classroom are birds. I ultimately, with the assistance of a awesome staff, am responsible for the care of about 100 birds that we utilize in this pursuit of teaching these messages about birds. They're awesome. I never would have ever thought I'm going to train animals and do that animal husbandry. I never would have thought that. You know, I had pets growing up, but caring for animals is a whole different ball game, and I'm really lucky again that I have staff who are driven in that way, that really enjoy doing a lot of that work. So I can, at this point, kind of pick and choose the things that I get to do. Obviously in our job here, we all can expect to be cleaning an enclosure and cutting up rats and mice and feeding birds and doing those things. And I get to do that, and I learn a lot from it. So we care and house these 100 birds. Some of it is training, which I think is something I really do enjoy, that with positive reinforcement you can shape an animal's natural behaviors in relatively unnatural contexts. And I look at it as a tool towards the goal of education. It is really powerful to have a bird fly right past you. If it happens, you can count the number of times on your hands that happens to you in your normal daily life. But here I can guarantee that it's going to happen to any one of the people that come and visit, and or nearly guarantee, through training these animals. And that gets the attention, and once we have the attention, we can talk about any of the things we want to talk about, any of the issues that we've learned about, the things that might be less pleasant to talk about. So training birds and working with them in that context, I really love the opportunity to do it. Lots of fires to put out, things I have a little bit of construction, a little bit of pressure washing, a little bit of cutting up mice and rats, a little bit of training birds, managing people, a little bit of all of that every day.
What would you say to someone who works a 9-to-5 job, doesn't really interact much with outdoors, on occasion perhaps, and really doesn't have an interest in birds? Why should they care?
Why should they care? That's a really great question, because it'll make their life better if they do. If you're not already paying attention to them, they're one of the most beautiful, diverse, cool groups of things, and I think everybody can find, I don't know, I'd be hard pressed to think of someone who couldn't find something they liked about birds. And the fact that you could easily walk outside of your office for 2 minutes and have access to that thing that's going to brighten your day a little bit, that's a reason to care, I think. And then beyond that, in terms of the bigger value that it brings to all of us, if we're all paying attention and we're all sharing those things that we see and being curious about those things that may or may not reflect some change in our environment. This is not about the bird necessarily. It's about the bird and what that bird is going to tell you about your health and your children's health and the environment that we all share with these birds. So that's a pretty powerful, little deeper reason to care. I think, you know, what's the more important one? It's whichever one gets you to pay attention to the bird. I really have grown to like the idea that there are parts of science that don't involve the science at all, but that are really critical, that often get left behind in the process of science. So somebody can be brilliant in astrophysics but can't explain one lick of the things that they're so passionate and brilliant about to anyone else, and there, to me, it loses a lot of the value. There are only so many Neil deGrasse Tysons out there that are both brilliant and can communicate well, and so there's a place for someone who likes to communicate those things to take that information to the people that can really use it to make things better, right? So the idea is use the information that we gather to make the world a better place, right? That's pretty cliched, but it's kind of the goal of everything most people do, I think. I'm the kind of guy that I like to commit to something and see it through, and I've seen this place grow an enormous amount while I've been here. I'm very proud of what we've built here, and I want to continue to do it as long as I can, as long as it's practical, as long as it's reasonable. That's what tomorrow looks like. Sure. One never knows, but yeah, I love what I do. I love the people I work with. That's a big part of it. Yeah.